Taylor, I think you should stick to Catholicism. Your obsession with Trump is not good. The politics in the U.S. are not the center of the world. Jesse, I think you and I are not obsessed with Trump, and we both articulate all the time on in our books, and we're going to talk about your new book here shortly, that the politics in the U.S. are not the center of the world. But I think there's people who sometimes get frustrated that we're even talking about this. But look, Roe v. Wade, the onset of communism, the onset of LMNOP plus agenda, the attack on our children, all of these are real issues. And, we're married men, we're fathers. These are things that we talk about. These are things that we pray about. So to whistle past the graveyard and say, politics doesn't matter, we'll skip on that. Let's talk about, 5 things you didn't know about infant baptism. Yes, we'll do that. But these are also pressing issues. What do you say, Jesse?
Absolutely, because as Catholics, we have a moral obligation to influence government. In fact, the church does. Here's the new catechism, what it says in 2246 of the catechism. It says this: it is part of the church's mission to pass moral judgments, even in matters related to politics. 2246. It also says the same thing in 2244. In other words, these 2 sections of the catechism, they basically say this, that here's the relationship between politics and the Catholic religion. Politics, to me, Taylor, it's just a caboose. It's at the end of the train. The engine that should run politics based on church teaching, the engine is objective truth, which is based on the Catholic religion. They cannot be separated. That's Masonic. That's a Masonic principle. The church is a supernatural institution set up by God. The government's a natural institution. The supernatural must influence the natural with the eternal laws of God and promote a culture of life and virtue amongst its citizens. To not do so, the church is derelict in her duties. The church must influence government because the church was set up by God and government was set up by man.
Yeah. And people will say, oh, well, we should stay out of politics. Read Catholic Church history. A lot of Protestants say, well, Constantine got involved and everything went bad. Well, from the time of Constantine, even before Constantine, the integration of church and state, and it's sometimes a deep struggle, has always been part of the Christian experience, always been part of Catholic Christianity. We are not Quakers. We are not Amish. We do not run away. We very much integrate ourselves into the political process. So that's just Catholicism. But, thanks for your input, Antonio.
Now, Taylor, don't get me wrong. The end game of Catholicism, obviously, is to establish the social reign of Christ the King. That's the end game. Because Jesus Christ is not just a spiritual king, he's also the king of every man, woman, and child, whether you know it or not. And it's the Catholic Church's duty to make that come to pass. Jesus Christ is also the king of every nation, whether they know it or not. And it's up to the Catholic Church to bring about that social kingship of Christ into the world, into every individual human heart. And guess what? Sometimes you may have to do that by mixing in with Caesar, by, again, integrating with Caesar.
Yeah, it's just like saying, well, I believe in the separation of church and family. What happens to the family when you do that? It degrades. It becomes degenerate. If you take out the leaven of Christianity from the state, it becomes atheistic, it becomes degenerate, it becomes sexually confused, it becomes financially corrupt. And, in the Middle Ages, really even up to the 1800s, if you were a Catholic monarch, if you were a Catholic king, and you got out of line, you couldn't just say, I'm going to get away with this, like our modern politicians do. They, serve amount of time and they go get a book deal and then they just live like the Obamas and the Clintons, right? No, if you got out of line, the Roman pontiff would excommunicate you. He could place an interdiction on you. Like there was the ultimate check and balance, and it was a Christian moral standard. And ever since really the Protestant Reformation and really since 1870, we haven't been experiencing that. And what have we had? World War I, World War II, Cold War, and now we're having globalism and secularism and communism. It's horrible.
When people tell us that, as Christians, you should stay neutral on political issues, you hear people say that. You'll hear people say, God doesn't care about political issues. He just cares about evangelism, and the salvation of souls. It doesn't matter how a person votes. No, that's a deception. God does care. We have a principle called the principle of subsidiarity in the Catholic Church. We have a principle called the principle of authority. We have a principle called the principle of solidarity. When you follow these social principles of the Catholic Church, this is how you govern. And so as a Catholic, of course, the enemy wants us to become mute. We can't allow the Catholic voice to be censored. We have to espouse a biblical worldview for our culture. We can't be silent. We got to continue to talk about the Catholic faith and Catholic teaching boldly, come what may.